All right, this is based on the message from the 16th. So by the time I examine myself and see the plank in my eye, I end up feeling like, who am I to call this person out on their mess? And I back off, but then their offenses never get properly addressed. How can I improve so that I stand up for myself without judging the other person? So I believe that was your message.
That was, that was
Would you
your
like to
message.
explain that?
I think that you're the one who preached that. Yeah. You know, this is a question I've gotten several times when I've preached on Matthew 7, where Jesus says, why you're looking for the dust particle in your neighbor's eye when you got a 2x4 or a plank coming out of your own eye. And so I'm happy to clarify this. The purpose for Jesus giving that is not to have us get into self-groveling, like, oh, I'm so miserable, I'm so disgusting, or whatever. He's simply there collapsing our judgment mechanism, our addiction to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it applies to our general perception of other people, where under the fall, we tend to evaluate, size up, criticize, if not with our mouth, and then in our mind. We're gossiping in our mind, and we're feeding off of that, the contrast, because it makes us feel better about ourselves. However pathetic we are, at least we're not as fat as that person, at least we're not as ugly as that person, at least we don't smoke like that person, at least we're better parents than that person. And so it's by cutting everyone else off the knees, we feel a little taller. And human beings have been doing this throughout history. So Jesus and Paul does it and James does it. To free us from that, they reverse it. And they say, no, instead of minimizing your own sin and offenses, which is what we tend to do, and maximizing others, don't maximize yours and minimize others. But the point isn't to grovel about it, you know, and to be obsessed with it. That doesn't do anyone any good. It's simply to keep us humble. The other thing is that there's this important distinction. In judgment, we always separate ourselves from others, okay? So there's this contrast. And we put ourselves up here and feed ourselves off of people. We become parasites, where we are feeding off of their worth, to describe it to ourselves. It's the opposite of love, which is why it's the original sin. But in relationships, there's a right kind of separation, and that is not this way, but this way, where we distinguish things. And the same word is used in Greek, krino, which means to separate, but we're not separating from people, we're rather separating for people. And so in relationships, it's very appropriate to say, this is helpful, this is not helpful. You know, this is good for our relationship, this is bad for our relationship. When you say this, it does this to me. We're helping the relationship by making important distinctions. And so here, I would just encourage the person to remember the difference between a relationship and then our general view of others. I'll say things to close friends that I would never say to a stranger, because they've invited me on their life, and I've invited them in my life, and we're doing life together. And so it's appropriate. We're helping each other. But a stranger, I don't know, and so that comes across as judgment if they come up to me and say some of this. The only final thing I'll say is this, that if it required us getting out of our mess before we help someone else get out of our mess, no one would be helping anybody get out of their mess, because we're all in a mess. Yeah. And so, you know, it's all about the wounded helping the wounded, the messy helping the messy. That's right. I'll help your mess, you help mine, and we'll gradually outgrow our mess together.